The story begins as Mary Magdalene and the other Mary reached the tomb where Jesus' body had been placed and saw an angel roll away the stone at the entrance of the tomb.
When they looked into the tomb, they discovered it was empty. Jesus' body had been removed. The angel said Jesus had risen again. The woman rushed to tell the disciples that Jesus was alive.
Later that same day, 2 of Jesus' disciples began walking out of Jerusalem on their way to Emmaus, a little village a few miles away. As they walked, a stranger caught up with them and asked to walk with them. They said yes, but carried on with their conversation.
The stranger asked what they were talking about, and the disciples were surprised that the stranger hadn't heard what had happened to Jesus of Nazareth.
The disciples began to tell the stranger of the things that had happened to Jesus, the greatest prophet who ever lived.
They told the stranger that the chief priests and the elders had seized him and persuaded the Roman governor to condemn him to death and then have him crucified.
The disciples came to Jesus by saying all that had seen in Jesus of Nazareth. They had believed that he was the one sent to save everyone. They explained that some of women who were friends of Jesus had found his tomb empty and seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive.
Suddenly it became apparent that the stranger knew more than he had previously let on. He asked, "Don't you understand what the prophets had said? It was necessary for Christ to suffer and in order for him to be glorified."
The stranger continued explaining the scriptures as only Jesus had explained to them before. When they finally reached Emmaus and the stranger said goodbye, the disciples begged him to stay and have supper with them.
During the meal, when the stranger took some bread and blessed it, broke it into pieces and gave it to them, the disciples at last realized who he really was. "Jesus," they gasped, but then the stranger vanished.
The disciples hurried back to Jerusalem to tell the others, but before they could tell their story, they were told that Jesus had appeared to Peter and spoken to him.
Jesus' followers were jubilant and longing to hear what Jesus had said. Suddenly there was silence. No one had heard anyone knock. No one had seen anyone enter. Yet there was Jesus.
Everyone shrank back in fear, but Jesus told them not to be afraid and to look at the wounds on his hands and feet. At once the disciples moved forwards towards Jesus and touched his hands and knew that he was Jesus. Together they sat down and had a meal, as they had done many times before.
One disciple, Thomas, was not present, and later when he heard the story, found the news hard to expect. 8 days later, when the disciples were again all together, Jesus appeared and approached Thomas and asked him to feel his hands and feet and have faith. Thomas broke down and wept.
Thomas finally believed it was Jesus as he had seen him for himself. Jesus said, "Those who don't see him and yet still believe are even more blessed."
It was time for Jesus to leave the world. He gathered his disciples together and walked with him to the Mount of Olives. It was there he said farewell and was taken away.
Jesus' last words to the disciples were, Don't leave Jerusalem yet. I want you to tell people about me and preach my gospel to everyone. Teach them everything that I have taught you, and remember that I am with you always."
Jesus lifted his hands and blessed them.